From the American Neurological Association, I'm Adeline Goss. This is ANA Investigates. In 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT, putting generative artificial intelligence, generative AI, into all of our hands. And ever since then, academic physicians have had a choice to make. Do we use AI in our work or not? Wherever we land on that question, AI and its implications for academic research have become impossible to ignore. How can we use AI in academic medicine, and how should we use it? Dr. Ethan Mollick is an associate professor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and author of Co-Intelligence, the New York Times bestseller about integrating AI into our work and life. He'll talk about the role of AI in academic neurology with ANA Investigates producer Zach London, professor of neurology at the University of Michigan. Here's Zach.
All right, Ethan, it's so nice to have you here on ANA Investigates. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Ethan, this generative AI revolution feels different, right, from previous advances in machine learning. So what, in your view, is most transformative about generative AI?
As you point out, machine learning has been around for a while, and certainly anyone in medicine has encountered algorithmic AI that takes a lot of data and makes decisions about the future based on running lots of logits, essentially, lots of regressions. And that's been really useful and transformative in a lot of ways. Those systems are really good at making numerical predictions about the future based on past data, but they weren't very good at human language. So if you ended a sentence with the word filed, the AI didn't know whether you're filing your taxes or filing your nails. So what really kicked off generative AI was a paper in 2017 laying out a new mechanism for AI called the transformer with attention mechanism. Let AI pay attention to not just the last word in the sentence, but the entire sentence, entire page, entire paragraph, whatever. And it turns out that by doing that, AI has created a sort of a model of language. We call these large language models right now. And by creating a model of language, it turns out they just do a lot of things that are very different than what we could have expected. So by having a model of human language, they can also draw conclusions about complex topics, make diagnoses, offer advice in ways that were not actually expected. So part of this is we don't actually know the full capabilities of these systems. And part of it is it's unlocked a different kind of AI capability than what we had before.
And AI is being used for a lot of different things, but certainly we as academics are interested in how it's used in research. And I think you've noted that despite an increase in scientific publishing in the last several decades, innovation has actually slowed dramatically. So tell me about that phenomenon and what impact you think AI could have on the future of research and innovation.
Yeah, there was a really interesting paper, I think it was Nature, that outlined the idea that even though we're in a golden age of publishing, there's a lot of papers out there, no one's reading them, right? So old papers are getting canonized. This hurts my heart as an academic as well. It's been good for my highly cited papers, but not so great for everything else. But there's just too much to read. The burden of knowledge is too high. And, in addition to all the problems that otherwise are kind of underlying, scientific publishing, but it's really hard to keep track of things, right? You can't just go and know what's happening in an entire field. So among the interesting side effects of AI is its ability to maybe help guide and get through this. That's on every side. So there's good and bad to all of this. We already know that in the bellwether field on this, or maybe the canary in the coal mine field in this, which is computer science, we're already up to sort of 17% plus of papers clearly have AI writing in them. Reviewers are increasingly using AI writing. So there's a sort of contamination, but also hope for some guidance for the future.
So let's then start by talking about ways that AI can be applied to academic research before we get into how it should be applied. How do we use AI to write and publish articles? How can academics use AI in that field specifically?
So there's a few different ways that comes into play. I'd urge anyone, by the way, who's listening to this, and if you haven't, you really need to be trying to do some research with using GPT-4o, which is the most advanced model. You can also use a model called Claude 3.5 from Anthropic. But these systems can handle data. They can write code, especially GPT-4o. When I do data analysis or data work, I actually get Python or static coding help from the AI to do this stuff. So there's a companion piece that accelerates work. A lot of people are using it on the writing side of things. Their writing matters, and AI written material is quite good at pulling together information. People are using this, obviously, also for thinking about things like bouncing ideas off of the AI. I was talking to a quantum physicist at Harvard, and he said all of his best ideas come from talking to the AI right now. I'm like, does it know quantum physics really well? He's like, no, not at all. But it asks really good questions, and that gets me thinking when I want to. So there's a lot of the kind of use cases for this. And then there's even automating research, right? So there's a couple of early papers from out of Carnegie Mellon's chemistry department that shows that if you give a large language model access to lab bench equipment and the ability to write code for it, that it can spontaneously engage in discovery. But that's early days.
You sort of touched on a couple of different things there. I mean, you talked about the specifics of writing, but also a little bit about research methodology. So, I mean, are we at a point where we should be using AI to assist with actual research methodology?
I think you should treat an AI like kind of like a person. It's not a person, but that's the best analogy to work with it. And so in any field, when you work with the system, you're going to learn what it's good about, what's bad about, what it tends to make stuff up or BS you about. And you kind of learn that from working with these systems. So right now, it's a reasonably good, and there's some papers on this, RA help, right? Help me with, summarize this paper. Am I citing this properly? Like those conversations I have all the time. When I wrote my book, I've got a couple hundred scientific references. I had the AI read most of those papers and write summaries for me. And I actually would send those summaries to some of the authors to see if they liked them. And generally, everyone was pretty happy with those outcomes. So like as an assistant, as something you would have an RA do, it can be quite useful. It has flaws. It'll make stuff up. It's not going to be 100% accurate. So you're going to decide what's most important. Whatever you're best at researching right now, the AI is not going to be as good as you at that. But I mean, I've had it build machine learning models for me to solve a problem. I've had it do all the kinds of little work that slows down your research in all kinds of miserable, tiny ways, converting data sets from one format to another, preparing and cleaning data, all of that stuff it's pretty good at doing, and it's getting better.
I think that's sort of one of the key points you make in your book, that it's getting better. So, you've been using it for these things. I'm assuming the way that you use it has changed over time. Is that more a function of the way you use it or a function of the changes in the AI since you've been using it?
Great question. I mean, both things are happening at once. I'm getting better at using the system, which again, experience is the only key here. And I think a lot of people are waiting for instructions about how to use AI to solve problems in their field. And those instructions aren't forthcoming, right? And I think as scientists, we're used to the idea that we have to, and I'm a social scientist, I still count, that we're used to the idea that we are on our own, right? We improvise equipment, we improvise solutions to problems. AI is in the same kind of boat. There isn't an instruction manual out there. OpenAI has never thought about the implications for, medical research for using AI, really. They have no idea what the system is good or bad for. It's really good at qualitative research. Who do, right? So part of this is about a methodology that we can experiment with that I'm learning more about as I move forward. Part of this is about personal experience. As I learn more about the system, I know when to trust it and when not to. And part of this is definitely that the systems are getting smarter. And I would anticipate that, we're going to see some more big leaps coming. I was more skeptical about that earlier in the year, but having spoken to people at Microsoft and OpenAI and elsewhere, I think we're still in the early days of the intelligence gain of this stuff, with intelligence in quotes.
Interesting. When you've written about the way that we use AI in research, one of the things you mentioned was it can be used to amplify the impact of our research, perhaps just through helping us communicate. Can you give some examples of that?
Sure. I mean, academics are weird, because especially academic doctors, not personally weird, I'm sure, Zach, but they are weird in a lot of ways because we jam a lot of different things into this single profession, right? You're supposed to be able to do good research and write about good research and find interesting problems, but also in most cases work with patients and train people. Like, it's too much. We're not going to be equally good at all of these kinds of things. So one thing the AI, is quite good at is filling in some of these gaps. And a very common gap that a lot of researchers have is trying to explain to other people why their work is meaningful or why it matters, or making connections to other people's lived experience, or how to use this stuff in an actual real world setting. The AI is very good at translation. It's very good at make this simpler to explain, but it also, you can get weirder with it, right? Like I built GPTs, which are little AI modules you could talk to for my papers. People could talk to and ask questions about the paper, get answers on them. The weirdest version of this I've done is Claude 3.5 can build actual interactive simulations and games. So I've actually thrown academic papers into this and said, make a simulation that explains how this works. And it creates a pretty good one. Or even weirder, make a video game based on the themes of this paper. And it's great because you get a high score by, in this case, solving a particular academic problem.
It reminds me a little bit of sort of what Twitter was in medicine in its heyday. And maybe you've noticed this in your field as well, which is it sort of forces people to, because of character limits, say things in the most concise possible way. And you could see that the people who were really big on that social media platform were the people who were good at that. And I think that limited people who were not good at that. So maybe this is something that AI can actually do, which is take complicated topics and distill them down to fewer sentences, fewer characters.
And also, it works really well as a kind of role-playing companion. So it's not just about distilling stuff down, which I think is valuable, but it's also about what would someone be confused by here? How could I help them become less confused by this, right? The early studies we have of AI as doctor, right? And there's a few papers out right now that are generalist papers of high quality. And then there's lots of little specialized JAMA papers of like this particular specialty, use this for this particular reason. And we're in early days. On actual diagnosis and stuff, there's a lot we don't know. But the interesting result that comes out of a lot of these is patients far prefer the bedside manner of AI to physicians under most circumstances, right? So it's not just about making that academic research connection. It's about helping us make an empathetic connection, which I know feels really weird and upsetting in a lot of ways because it's not supposed to be, AI is not supposed to be empathy, right? But whatever faked empathy, it's an empathy machine. It's quite good at that.
So let's get a little more granular here and talk about the ways that individual researchers can integrate AI into their work. In your book, Co-Intelligence, I loved the way you sort of laid out these two possible approaches to AI. You called them centaurs and cyborgs. So walk us through what you mean there.
We got a little science fiction, a little mythology. The centaur is half person, half horse. And the idea here is that there's a kind of clear dividing line. This is how people usually start working with AI. So I imagine a lot of your listeners are probably using it in very narrow ways to solve a problem. Write that email to my dean. Help me write this grant proposal or make sure this IRB stuff is correct, right? You're handing off work you don't want to do to the AI and you're maintaining work that you want to do. So clear dividing line between machine and person. The more advanced version is this sort of cyborg work where you blend together AI work and human work. And this is how my academic research and my book worked. So for the book itself, it was very cyborg worky. Like almost all the writing in the book is my own writing. Certainly all that it says acknowledges my writing, but I couldn't have written it without AI. Like this is my third book. And every time I write a book, I realize how much I hate writing books and regret it immediately. But this was the easiest to write in some ways because when I got stuck on a sentence, which is something that happens if you're a writer, give me 30 versions of how to end this sentence in different styles. When I need an analogy to explain something, give me some analogies to work with here. Summarize these research papers, make sure I'm citing them correctly in the book. And at the most advanced level, you are pretend to be a reader who has this kind of characteristic and give me feedback on how to improve this book section. So it was little bits of questions going into the AI, not an entire workload.
So some of the examples you just gave of these different tasks that people use for AI were writing emails, writing grant proposals, brainstorming ideas for your book. But I feel like a lot of people, a lot of academics feel hesitant to admit when they're using AI in their work. Questions like, oh, have you used AI to fill in the blank, write a letter of recommendation, et cetera. These conversations about AI very much remind me of like those old purity tests that were so popular in the 90s where people would sort of be afraid of being judged, so they didn't want to necessarily answer honestly. And some journals have, outlawed using AI or certainly forced authors to disclose if they're using ChatGPT or Claude. So how do you think academic institutions and publications should be handling researchers' use of AI?
It's a really interesting question. And I think this is a fundamental challenge to academic publishing. I mean, academic publishing has been creaky for a while, right? It's weird that we write stuff that takes months to get reviewed for a print journal that does not actually limited in numbers of things. And there's a whole ecosystem of fake journals around us right now. And preprints increasingly are becoming more powerful in most fields where it's pre-peer review matters. And then we have all the traditional problems of replicability and everything else and methodology. And so I think that the system is more broken than we like to think about a lot. So this is going to be another strain on it. It's a potential solution, but it's also going to be a very big strain. It's also clear that where AI is right now is it's a tool. So like, I don't acknowledge using Microsoft Word in my acknowledgements. Like, how do we use AI? In some ways, you're irresponsible if you're not using AI to help you rewrite your abstract to make more sense. Does it matter? Is that if it's checking over your work and helping make your intro tighter, is that cheating or not, right? If you're using AI to double check the data or to look at a document and give you feedback, what does that mean? Let alone these systems actually useful for research, right? They have visual capabilities to them. They're quite good at writing code for you, like that you're hopefully going to check yourself. It's a very hard question. And I think the real worry I have is that by banning this stuff or making it feel bad, people are just going to use it and not tell you, right? In the corporate world, people, after every talk I give, come up to me and tell me secretly they're using AI for everything they do, and they're just not telling people about it. I spoke to the woman who wrote the policy to ban AI use at a major bank, and she used GPT-4 to write that because she didn't want to do it herself. She just did it on her phone. So I think we have to acknowledge that this is not going to be a sin, but we also have to talk about positive use cases. So for example, if you don't use AI a lot, the number one use case that people put AI to as scientists is asking for citations. And that is the weakest spot of current AI systems because they actually don't do this well. So they're going to hallucinate citations. They're going to make up things that sound completely plausible, but aren't real citations. So how do we get people to understand, don't use this for citations, absolutely use it to help you rewrite your introduction. Don't use it to do a data analysis unless it's writing code, in which case you should definitely use it to do data analysis. Part of it is we have to have that discussion to get to a place where we're using this properly.
If you think that it's sort of irresponsible to not be using AI for certain tasks, reviewing, revising, et cetera, should organizations actually be incentivizing using it, not just permit it, but actually reward it?
I mean, I think we ultimately will be doing that because if you want to get published, your stuff is going to look worse if it doesn't have help, and you're going to fall behind in this kind of characteristic. What worries me, honestly, is academia is really good at normal science. Like we're pretty good at kind of progressing things along and having our occasional Kuhnian crisis where like we realize the model breaks and, but where the stakes are relatively low on any individual paper, but, high overall. Scientific research is a terrible mechanism that's better than any other mechanism we've ever developed, the method that we do stuff by. So now we have something that's actually changing the order to some degree. And we need to figure out how to work with this. And my biggest worry is fields sitting this out conservatively, because then we're not shaping the direction this is being used for. It's not just about encouraging use or discouraging use. It's also about what does science look like in a world where we have AI tools. I think a lot about, I have papers, I don't know about your field, but I have papers that have taken 8 years from kind of conception to gathering data, to getting it under review, to getting rejected, to rewriting, to getting through a revision process, to seeing the world in print, right? Like that's not uncommon. And I'm sure everyone I know in your field, I see similar kinds of results. I want to point out that the timeline right now for embedding markets for AGI, that's a machine that's smarter than a human at any intellectual tasks, has that at 2031 or 2032. Like I have papers I'm probably starting today that will be in a world where people think that there will be AI that will outperform any research assistant you have. And like, these are reasonable people doing this. This is the explicit goal of the AI companies. I think we need to be thinking proactively about change.
And AI is clearly speeding up our ability to do research and publish. But how do we keep that from just overwhelming the publishing industry with meaningless noise?
We're not going to. That is going to break very quickly. The question is, does it become an arms race where we use AI peer review to do, and there's some papers suggesting it's pretty good at this stuff, right? Are we going to use AI peer review to fight AI written papers? Are we going to change the way papers work? Because, in medicine it's already better than it is when I write in an economics journal, right? Where there's a lot more kind of fluff and stuff around it. Is it, our papers going to have to get shorter where it's like, here's what I found and here's all the data. One of the things I've been actually using AI for is in my field, you publish replication data. So often you have public data and you'll talk about how you did the analysis. I can actually feed the replication data right into GPT-4 and say, reproduce the results and tell me if they seem accurate still. And it can do that, right? That changes how science works in some ways. So I think we need to be rethinking this in a pretty fundamental way because I do think journals are going to break pretty quickly.
So realistically, not everyone listening to this podcast is going to be at the forefront of this revolution. I mean, so what is your advice to the vast majority of academics, who I guess I would consider to be more armchair AI users, in terms of just how to not be left behind?
I think part of this is getting over the fear that this is technical. Like there's a joy in working with this and an interest in working with it. So my number one piece of advice is just use it for everything. What you should do is pick a day, get GPT-4 on your phone. It has great voice recognition, pay the $20 a month, and then just use it for everything you do. I need ideas for this. Listen to this meeting and summarize who's going to do what from this. You'll find it's really good at some stuff, really bad at other stuff. Just use it. And people are very resistant to just using it. Just use it, right? Don't use it for anything ethically compromised or confidential or there's breaking patient rules. But for everything else, just try it and see what happens.
So bringing it to the table, as we say, right? So it's just part of the conversation and everything that you do.
That's exactly right.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Ethan, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or questions you would like me to ask you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so one point I would make is that, as educators or as doctors, we are very defensive of a technology like this encroaching on what we do. because we're very good at what we do, and the AI is not as good as anybody who's listening to this podcast is in neurology. It's not at that level. It might be, right? And I think we need to spend some time worrying about that, but it's not at that level. But it is pretty good. So part of, I think, what we have to grapple with is what I call the best available human standard. Like, we tend to view this as it's not 100% accurate. How accurate is it? Is it good enough that if you don't have access to a neurologist because you have to wait, a year to get access, or you're part of the world or part of the country that doesn't have access to someone, should you be using this, right? Is it valuable as a second opinion? I think it's part of our obligation is professionals is to do the research to lay out the conditions for other people in the world and when they should use this and when they shouldn't. And that strikes me as incredibly urgent. Like, part of what my research is on, when is this useful for teaching? And the answer is, it seems to be pretty good for teaching. Is it as good as having the world's best teacher at Michigan or at Penn teaching you about this topic? No. But how many people have access to that? So I think we need to also be thinking about standards in kind of a useful way. How does this bring more people in and let us expand what we do? And I think if we just gatekeep, we're going to be in trouble as a result.
Well, it's been wonderful to hear these practical and I would say philosophical rubrics for living and working with AI. Ethan, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Zach.
That was Dr. Ethan Mollick, Associate Professor at Wharton, talking with Zach London, Professor of Neurology at the University of Michigan. ANA Investigates is the official podcast of the American Neurological Association. The show's producers are members of the ANA Education Innovation Committee, chaired by Michelle Johansson. I'm Adeline Goss, podcast host and executive producer. Our program was produced today by Zach London, Caitlin White, and me, with help from Jen Hurley. You can listen to past episodes of the show, subscribe to us so you never miss an episode, and access all of the ANA's educational programs on the Education tab at myana.org. That's it for ANA Investigates. See you next month.